In this video, I'll show you how I paint metallic Black Legion Terminators. Hello everyone, and welcome to another brushstroke painting guide. This time I'm going to be painting a Black Legion Chaos Terminator with a little twist in that I'm going to do a metallic black for the armour. To start with, I've primed the model with surface primer from Vallejo in black through an airbrush, and then just to pick out the details for the camera, I've done a light airbrushing of the Vallejo grey. The first colour we're going to start with is Steel from Dark Star. Now if you don't know these paints, this is a fantastic colour and it's almost metallic black straight out of the bottle. The key here to getting a nice smooth surface is to thin the paint with a touch of water just to help it flow from the brush, and apply that as 2 smooth coats over the whole of the armour. Next we're going to pick out some of the details like the tubing across here and the joints in the armour at the knees and the elbows, and I think maybe the vents on the back as well. And we're going to do that in ESHIN grey. As before, just add a touch of water to help your paint go on smoothly, and apply this as 2 thin coats. Next we're going to paint in the silver details like this chainmail and the tubes or pistons on the back of the armour, and we're going to paint that in IRONBREAKER. Next, we'll base colour the loincloth and the tassels with deep red from scale 75. Just as before, add a touch of water just to get the paint moving smoothly, and apply this colour as multiple layers to build up to a solid finish. Now we're going to paint in all of the gold details and trim to the armour, spikes and edging. For this we're going to use Old Gold from Vallejo, one of my favourite gold paints. As before, we're going to thin it down with a bit of water to make it apply smoothly to the model, and we're going to build that up with a couple of layers to make a solid finish. Do take your time painting in the gold trim, but if you do make any mistakes, then just neaten that back up again with some of the steel paint. Next we'll paint in the skulls, the tusks on the helmet, and don't forget any of the claws on the edge of the armour. And we'll paint that in with RAKARTH flesh. Again, touch of water, try and keep the paint smooth, and if you make any mistakes, just tidy it back up again with the colour needed. So while painting the skulls, I've noticed there's some leather straps holding them, so let's paint those in with some MOURNFANG brown. Try and be as neat and careful as you can. Any mistakes, just neaten back up again with some RAKARTH flesh. Next we'll do an edge highlight across the sharper edges of the black armour just to pick out some of those details using IRONBREAKER. With a little paint on your brush, just run the edge of your brush along the sharp edges just to pick out those lines. With the edge highlight now done, it's time to apply our first wash, which is going to be to the black armour, the loincloth, the silver details and the ESHIN grey details, and for that we're going to use some NULN oil. You can apply this quite liberally across all of the armour. just taking care not to get any onto the gold trim. Just work it around and move it into all of the recesses and try and keep it as smooth and even as you can. Once applied, you're going to need to leave this for around 30 minutes to dry completely before moving on to the next stage. Next, we'll apply a wash to all of the gold trim of the armour, and for that we're going to use some SERAPHIM Sepia. As before, apply a liberal coat across all of the gold trim, taking care to keep it away from the black armour. Just work it around into all of the recesses and allow a good 30 minutes for it to dry fully before moving on to the next stage. With the gold trim now fully dry, we're going to move on to applying a shade to all of the bone and tusk details. For this we're going to use AGRAX EARTHSHADE. As before, make sure that this is fully dry before moving on to the next stage. Next, we're going to brighten up the gold trim to the armour by applying a layer of Liberator gold. At first you may feel that this colour isn't actually doing anything, but what it does is it really brightens the gold and changes its tone quite dramatically. What you want to do is paint it onto the highest areas, leaving the recess areas darker from the paint underneath. Next, we'll highlight the skulls and tusks with a dry brush of PALLID witch flesh. Do take your time with this and be careful not to get paint on any unwanted areas such as the gold trim or black armour. Next up, we're going to highlight all of the gold trim to the armour using some STORMHOST silver. Just as with the black armour, taking a small amount of paint, run the edge of your brush along the sharp edges of the armour trim and take your time to work your way around all of the gold, not forgetting any of the little rivets and details along the way. Now we're going to add a glaze to our bones just to give them a bit more of an aged and weathered look using some SERAPHIM Sepia. Unlike with the other washes, we're just looking to wet the surface with this step and apply the wash as a tint. For the eye lenses, I simply kept the grey primer. However, should you need to, you should base them in with ULTHUAN grey. I then used Bloodletter red glaze to tint both of the lenses to a bright red. I believe Bloodletter has actually been discontinued, so its replacement is ANGRON red clear, which you need to thin down with some Lamium medium. For the sword, I wanted to give it a contrasting blue steel look, so I first based it with Greynite steel. With our base coat now dry, we're going to increase the blue tint of the metal by applying a thin glaze of CALTH blue clear, thinned down with some Lamium medium. The CALTH blue is actually really strong, so you'll want to thin it down to about 1 part CALTH blue to 6 parts Lahmian medium. The aim of applying the glaze is to concentrate it more towards the bottom of the sword and along the sides where the grooves are, to accentuate the blue in those areas. When you're happy with your level of blue tint, allow the glaze to dry for a good half an hour before proceeding to edge highlight the sword with STORMHOST silver. With those final details done, all that remains to be done is to assemble the model and add it to its base. If you'd like a video guide on how I created the base for this model, you can find that by clicking this link. Otherwise, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please drop a comment below. If you'd like to see more of my work in progress pictures, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. But in the meantime, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to share. Thank you.